Welcome to Pavilion Garden 5 at the University of Virginia. It is one of the 10 unique gardens constructed around the perimeter of Thomas Jefferson's lawn. The current design of the gardens is a result of an initiative begun by University President Colgate Darden to return them to something approximating their original Jeffersonian design as private pleasure gardens. The lawn and accompanying gardens have remained the symbolic center of the university since 1819 and have been designated a U.S. National Historic Landmark District, as well as part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This designation is due to the site's architectural and cultural significance. However, the current prestige associated with the establishment of the university covers a darker narrative that is still being brought to light. In recent years, UVA faculty and students have been working on several projects to rediscover the experiences of enslaved laborers who helped build the university and worked for its white professors and the university students in the early decades. A UVA class led by Professor Lewis Nelson works to look past the facades of the lawn to consider the working spaces that sustained the university through its first half-century. Professor Nelson said in a recent UVA Today interview that the spectacular pavilion gardens we now enjoy supplanted, and for a long time silenced, the daily labor of chopping wood and cleaning fowl that once animated these zones. The current use of the gardens is a misappropriation of the past and dishonors the rich history that slaves had on grounds. Returning the gardens back to their functional states would work to tell a more inclusive narrative of the history of the university. Specifically, converting the pavilion gardens into active spaces of agriculture would recount their historical usage by enslaved laborers. The President's Commission on Slavery in the university has spearheaded several groups' efforts to reinsert the enslaved narrative into the history of UVA. There are now over 10 sites marking African American stories at the university. Furthermore, Monticello, Jefferson's home, has taken large steps towards acknowledging their past. It is clear that the university and the Charlottesville community are dedicated to honoring the vital role that enslaved and freed African American workers had in the region. Currently, the pavilion garden spaces are used as areas for relaxation and social gatherings. The true historical use of the garden spaces are completely removed from present dialogue, which is unacceptable. At least one of the gardens must be converted into a learning site that honors the true role that it played for much of the 19th century. Our goal, similar to Monticello's, is to restore the gardens to their historical usage by enslaved laborers. We aim to establish the space as an interactive garden where students, faculty, and community members can work together to grow and harvest produce. In addition to providing a more accurate account of the history of the university, the transformation of the gardens would create a space of collaboration and community. By planting, growing, and cultivating food, the gardens would strengthen our connection to the soil and to the people who worked it before us. In order to put this initiative into action, we must work with the architects and decision makers of the university. In particular, we need to work in conjunction with the Office of the Architect at UVA, which has control and insight on sustainable architectural projects on grounds. In addition, funding will need to be secured. The Equity and Environment Fund is a prospective source, the support from which would drive the execution of the project. With the produce harvested, we would donate it to the local food bank and homeless shelter, The Haven. Arguably the most important step in implementing this reinterpretation at UVA is including the voices of students of color. Working with organizations on ground such as the Black Student Union, BSU, and Political Latinx United for Movement and Action in Society, PLUMAS, would ensure that the initiative represents an appropriate historical narrative of enslaved and free laborers. The current project Jewel, Jefferson's University Early Life Project, makes the archives of UVA in its first 50 years digitally accessible and searchable, and serves as a vital tool in reinserting the history of African Americans on grounds. We would like to talk with members of the Special Collections to further this project and better archive the African American narrative. The pavilion gardens can still be enjoyed without ignoring or covering up their history. By functioning as working vegetable and herb gardens, they can be enjoyed with a sense of collaboration and community. This initiative would serve as a step in the right direction of reinserting the narrative of enslaved and freed laborers at UVA, working to increase the historic and cultural value of the university as a whole. Thank you.